Today's episode is brought to you by applaudable.net.
Humans work in contingencies. When this happens, when there's a trigger, then this happens.
One of the things you talk about is the formation of habits. You touched on it earlier around how we do things habitually, and that there are traits that high performance individuals and successful people actually have. There are ways we can change our habits, but you talk about this concept of goal, when, then as a tool. So do you want to speak to these three words that we can ask ourselves and actually address to build a new habit?
Yes. So habit formation, as you said, is incredibly important because we make 30 to 40,000 decisions every day or thereabouts, which sounds like a lot, but when you actually think about every decision that you make, and some of them we pay more attention to and less to others. So, and around 40% of what we do every day is by habit. So what we want to do is we want to, as we were saying before, habits can be really helpful for us. And particularly for elite athletes, a lot of what makes them great is they do the little things right. And it's the little things that you often don't see, the public don't see. It's often not that much fun. I would rather lie on the couch and watch TV than maybe get on the foam roller, which is why mine often has dust on it by the coffee table and those sorts of things. So what we might do is that from time to time, we might notice something that we want to change about ourselves, a behavior, whatever that might be. And the biggest challenge I find is it's not so much about giving people the knowledge about what would be useful for them. So it's not about saying to people, your life would be better if you did a bit more exercise and you ate better food and you went to bed earlier and you drank more water and you patted the cat and, did all these kinds of things. People know, I work with groups all the time and say, tell me one way that your life could be better. And we end up filling a whiteboard with all these things that everybody knows. So the challenge is actually, how do you get people from a good intention to actually it becoming a behavior? Because there's, typically there's a reason why you're not doing whatever that thing is at the moment. And what people most often tell you is that they either tell you it's because they don't have enough time or they're too lazy. That's usually what people will tell you. And it's not actually necessarily about either of those. It's just that you haven't quite worked out how to slot this thing into your day in a way that it just becomes as habitual as, and I use some very common examples: brushing your teeth, putting on your seatbelt, wearing a hat out in the sun, those sorts of things that you do, that you putting sunglasses on when it's bright and shiny outside. You typically don't have to put a lot of thought into those things because you've done them so many times. So what we find is that instead of loading ourselves up with, oh gosh, and now I need to, let's go with using the foam roller, because that's one that people often resonate with, rather than just going, okay, now that's an extra thing I have to add into my life, what we find is the easier you can make it for people, the more likely it is that it's going to happen. Again, another statement of the obvious. So why not take that new behavior, whatever the new behavior is, and let's go with the foam roller, and let's lock it in with something else that we do regularly. And because what happens is when you do that, it's kind of like you grease the wheels and you make it a lot easier for it to happen. So I gave the example of the foam roller in the lounge room. So let's just say your foam roller's in the lounge room. I don't know why they always seem to be in the lounge room, but they often are. And it might be that you go, okay, so the one thing I do every single day is at the end of the day, I sit down and watch an hour of TV, say. And let's say I watch a commercial channel. So you might say, well, the best way for me to tap these two things together is, and my wording here is important, when the commercials come on TV, then I'll get on the foam roller. So notice what I did there. I said when and then. And if you think about it, that's no different to what you do when you put your seatbelt on in your car. When I get in the car, then I put on the seatbelt. The last time you got into a car, you would have put a seatbelt on. And you gave it no thought at all because you didn't have to, because humans work in contingencies. When this happens, when there's a trigger, then this happens. So just by the mere nature of saying, when you watch the ads on TV, then you get on your foam roller, if it's a behavior that you want to change, it will trigger that thought in the front of your mind. Now, does it guarantee you'll do the behavior? No. But it does guarantee that you will more than likely think about it. So what we find is this when-then strategy tends to increase the likelihood of behavior change by 2 to 3 times. So, it's a winner in terms of, if the main reason you're not doing something is because it doesn't occur to you, then this is a strategy that you can use. So if I may, I'll just give you one more example, and it's a basketball one, so I think you'll like it. So I had a basketballer a professional basketballer that I worked with several years ago, and he said to me, Jo, my goal for this season is that I want to increase my shooting percentage, which, would be a good goal for a professional basketballer to have at the start of the season. And I said to him, well, how are you thinking that you're going to go about working towards that goal? And he said, well, I've decided that what I'm going to do is after practice each training session, I'm going to take an extra 100 shots before I leave. So that sounds like a great thing to do, and he said, yeah, but the problem is I keep forgetting. Like, I get to the end of practice, and because I'm tired, I get my stuff and I go home and I forget. And so I didn't give him any of this background that I've just given you about contingencies and brushing your teeth and all these sorts of things. So what I said to him is, I said, tell me what it looks like for you after practice. And he said, and this is where it's important because you need to work out what you're doing. So he said, we finish practice, I go to my locker, I grab my stuff, I get my keys out, and I go to my car and go home. And so what I needed to do was I needed to find the thing that happens all the time after practice. So I said to him, okay, when your keys are in your hand, then ask yourself, have you taken your shots? So what I've actually done is now I've piggybacked taking the shots onto his car keys. And so what it meant was then it became front of mind. He was motivated to do it. And so then he went to shooting after practice, every practice, because the keys, initially it was the keys with the trigger. And then after a while, it was like putting his seatbelt on. He didn't necessarily need the keys. And sometimes he would even just take the shots before he went back to his locker.
What you're doing to create that habit is that link to a trigger that sort of triggers you into an action that otherwise you may not have. You say there's no guarantees of that action, but by actually saying, if this is the outcome I want, then when this occurs, then I need to do this. And the then is the change of behavior, which is then habit forming.
Absolutely. And what's really important with this strategy is the language you use around it, that, we've kept saying when, then, when, then. Use that language and even say it out loud to yourself, maybe in a quiet room, but, say it out loud to yourself. And the reason that that's important is because some of the research in some of the cognitive activity and some of the neural activity that happens is because we work in contingencies. What will happen is if you use a when then, let's say you want to ring your sister more often and you think that Sunday's a good time to do it. When it's Sunday at 4:00, then I'll ring my sister. What will happen is at Sunday 4:00, your brain will start kind of almost tapping you on the shoulder, if you like, going, you were going to do something. But what we know is that if you link the new behavior to something that is happening regularly all the time, then, you increase the likelihood of that behavior change, provided you make the connection of that link.
Thanks for joining us for a basketball conversation. Feel free to start a conversation of your own with other OzSwoosh superfans by commenting below. And I look forward to sharing our next conversation with you soon. I hope you'll join us again sometime. Catch you later.